Hang on to your hats, everybody. This is a long intro. In this episode, we are heading back to the mid-'80s to talk about an album that had a song on it that the group ended up suing another artist over, claiming it sounded just a little too similar to a popular movie theme, which ended up going to number one. If that's all confusing, just stay tuned because we're talking about Huey Lewis and the News and their album, Sports. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. I'm Eric. I have to challenge myself with these longer.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I
was like, why are you putting yourself through this? But hey, that's why
like
you're the
running
host.
A marathon. It's like some of them are short, some of them are sprints, and then some are marathons that I want to get through. But everybody was forewarned or pre-warned the audience that this one's
going to
have a lot to it. So maybe this way they'll listen a little more intently. Like, okay, what's he?
Yeah,
it's
forcing them to pay attention.
Yeah. Just talking about.
It's clever how you put, though. It's intriguing how you put that little piece of, because I'm curious myself, because I don't even know what you're talking about there.
Yeah, well, you probably
we'll get to it.
We're going to jog your memory will be jogged.
Okay,
that's what's going to happen. Is we will absolutely jog your memory on it. So. But yeah, if you're new here, well, thanks for joining us. You found us. We've been waiting in our little corner of the internet, in a little corner of the podcast universe for you. And we're so happy that you stopped in. And if you like what you hear, go ahead and hit the follow button on whatever podcast provider you're using. And that way they'll let you know when new episodes come out. But the short answer is they come out every Thursday. So we're always here and we're on time with our episodes. I got to tell you, Eric, right? We're closing in on starting year number 5.
Yeah.
And we've never missed.
No.
Knock on wood.
No, we've had technical difficulties. We've had,
always overcome
managed. Yeah, it's a testament to you.
That's a testament to both of us. Our scheduling, it's
true.
Everything.
True. Yeah.
We do a lot of wrangling with our guests and okay, that's a different episode, patting ourselves on the back. So we'll I can go down that rabbit hole, but suffice it to say that that we put out our episodes every week consistently, and we invite you to come with us on the journey through our lives of music and movies, and share with your friends and invite them along too. And if you feel like supporting us and taking the next step, just go to buymeacoffee.com/3324. You can be one of our green room supporters. There's all the information you need there. You could just go check that out if you would. But for now, we are talking. This episode dates back to before we started the podcast, right?
Yeah, it does. This was one of the first topics that we were discussing, I believe.
We did 3 practice
runs, right? Right.
That's how serious we took this. Like we're doing like practice episodes. Like we're
yeah.
And
but I recall us, like, I think this was the first topic that you came up with, if I'm not mistaken. I think this even before we even did the trial run. It's like, yeah, we need to do sports. Sports was like one of the first. I think it was the first thing that
I could go back and look. I have them.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And
it's funny because the things we did, we did 3 practice episodes that we recorded, and we thought, like, let's do 3 things that we'll never do. Right. Yeah. That was the intent, was like, let's do 3 albums or episodes about things that we'll never do, so we'll never have to worry about it. Well, how wrong we were, because we've done 2 out of the 3 episodes we've done in real life. We did 12 Angry Men last year or the year before.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one laying in the crypt, and at this point, I'm not going to say never, although it's a long shot. Is Gino Vanelli, Black Cars? But we get further enough down the line, or if we meet somebody that says I love Gino Vanelli, they're becoming a guest and they're coming on and we're doing it. So it's we've got options.
But you know what? We've brought some of our guests around too. I mean, we've brought people on that haven't heard stuff that that we've introduced, and we've had people comment. People like our friends Sean and Nick, who listen to us intently, always giving us great feedback, and saying, "Oh, I really dug the episode, but I actually listened to the album and I never heard this before." I don't know how many times I've read that comment, and that's really nice to hear. And
Yeah,
and that's,
and we do that for each other too.
yeah,
Sometimes
that's right.
you'll pick an album that I'm familiar with, but not necessarily maybe listen to a lot
That's right.
that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So it's a learning journey for all of us, and that's I think what I love about what we do, and I just love that about music is it's so shareable.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a movie, it's a little more difficult. It's kind of like, okay, you got to either find it somewhere but with music, with today's technology, you can pretty much go home and pull it up, or when you're driving home, you can put it on
True.
the Bluetooth in your car. So that's the beauty. Music is really very shareable,
Yeah,
which
movies
is
are a little bit more time consuming. They're more involved.
yeah,
You're
it's still worth the while. It's
set the time for it.
yeah,
Not everybody has that luxury, uh,
yeah,
but
true.
there we go.
Yeah, they're both worth the effort. Anything artistic is, if you're sharing with somebody, is it's aces in my book. If you're
Hmm.
doing that, if you're sharing that, it's just those are the things that make life tolerable and worth living and enjoyable. And we're gonna bring you our point of view, and let's get into this. Let's dive in because there's actually there's some stuff to talk about with Huey Lewis. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Besides what I talked about in the open, which we'll get to, but let's get to the stats. That's the statistical and real time, real information we give after all the craziness starts. So this was released in September of 1983. It was produced by Huey Lewis and the News
Mm.
because they had done demos for this album, and I don't know if it was an engineer or somebody that was working with him says, you know what, the demo stuff you recorded actually sounds better than the stuff you had produced in your previous two albums. So they probably said, okay, well then let's kind of take the reins ourselves. There were 4 singles released from this album. Heart and Soul hit number 8. I Want a New Drug hit number 6. Heart of Rock and Roll hit number 6. And Walking on a Thin Line hit number 18. That was kind of on their way out with this album. It was number 1. Did hit number 1 on Billboard, and it stayed on the charts for 160 weeks.
Yeah, that's
impressive. That's over 3 years on the
Very
charts with the
impressive. Yeah.
Billboard. I don't know if that's the top 200 or what they do. And it went 7 times platinum.
Yeah.
So over 7 million out the door for this band that seemingly came out of nowhere. I mean, they were formed in 1979, right? And they had I think you were kind of into them a little bit before me because they had Do You Believe in Love and Working for a Living. And I think you were kind of listening to that, right?
Picture This was
that was the previous album.
Previous album right before. That was their second release. This first album, I thought, came out in 79. Can't believe that.
80. They were formed in 79, but their first album came out in 80. So they are a product of the 80s.
Yeah, I actually got Sports First. It was gifted to me, and the vinyl. And then, but of course, with everything, you go back and you listen to, the older stuff. If stuff appeals to you, but yeah, I was hooked. I was, I liked the looseness of the band, the dynamic. I love Huey Lewis's voice. I like the sort of old timey meets. It always reminded me of Billy Joel's Glass Houses. This band, like that particular sound, where it's sort of embracing the new wave, but it's very rock and roll, very sort of pop rock, and
a little throwbacky.
Yeah, horns were involved. You got the doo-wop, Huey Lewis, sort of the street corner, doo-wop groups of old, but with a modern twist, and having even the wardrobe, suggested 80s with the thin ties and that kind of thing. So it was kind of retro, but yet new at the same time. So I kind of dug that, and yeah, they incredible array of musicians in this band.
Let's give them some love because everybody knows Huey Lewis. It's like that. It's like Tom Petty. It's like Tom Petty, and then there's the Heartbreakers, and you may know Mike Campbell, but you probably don't know any of the other ones. In this case, they're really. But of course, Huey Lewis vocals and harmonica. You got Mario Cipollina on bass guitar. This is the original. This original crew is. I think 2 of them are gone, but the other ones are still there.
Yeah.
You got Johnny Cola on vocals, saxophone, and guitar. So he's like the second guitarist. Bill Gibson on drums, a really solid drum player. Chris
Yeah.
Hayes on lead guitar. He's like the rock. He was like the rock and roll portion.
Yeah.
He looks
Yeah.
like he didn't look like he fit with the rest of them. The other guys had a certain attire, but he kind of dressed like rock and rollish. And then you
Yeah.
had Sean Hopper on keyboards and vocals.
Yeah.
One additional musician on sports was Mr. John McPhee. You know who John McPhee is?
I don't.
From the Doobie Brothers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he
All
played
right.
pedal steel guitar in Honky Tonk Blues. So, yeah, John McPhee was with the Doobie Brothers like in the Michael McDonald era.
Okay. Yeah. So the
And he's still
yacht
with them
rock era.
now. So but he's a he's considered like McPhee is like a legacy member. When you
Sure.
see him,
Yeah.
you'll know him. He's got like the buck teeth and he's got long hair. You'll know like when you see him, like, oh, that guy. That's John.
Okay. Okay. Yes. All
But
right.
he's been in the Doobies forever. But he's considered like a
Mm.
a generational member, not a Johnny Come Lately. So what I wanted to talk about, this album came out in 83, but it didn't crack. It didn't hit until 84. And 1984 was a very interesting year. Something happened in 1984 that has never happened again. You want to venture a guess?
No, go for it. I'm sorry.
1984 had the fewest amount of number one albums.
Interesting. Okay.
There were only 5 number one albums in 1984, and Sports was one of them.
I'm going to assume that Van Halen was another, right?
No, and
No.
I'm going to go through. I'll go through in order.
Yeah.
Of starting with January, and when you see the company that Huey Lewis was in, it's amazing that they were able to get in there. So in the beginning of 1984, Thriller was still big from when it came out. Thriller spent the first 15 weeks of 1984 at number one still.
Okay.
That went on to sell 34 million copies. After that, I don't know if you remember, but the soundtrack to Footloose.
Oh, yeah. That was a monster.
Was a monster.
Yeah.
That spent 10 weeks at number one, and it sold 10 million copies. Sports then was the next number one, and it was number one for only 1 week.
Mm.
They literally walked in the door, said, "We're here, we got to go," and they were out. But the album stayed on the charts for 160 additional weeks, right? After that, Born in the USA, was number one, only for 4 weeks. That sold 17 million copies.
That's surprising.
The album that was number one for the longest would close out the year, and it's Purple Rain.
Okay.
Was number one for 22 weeks in 1984 and sold 13 million copies. Total, not that year, but so you see that like Huey Lewis they were number one for 1 week, but they were in the company of Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, Prince, and a soundtrack to an album that was just running away with hits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and this was the fewest amount of number one albums in a year.
That's wild. That's a very interesting tidbit right there.
Yeah. And it was the second biggest selling album of the year behind Thriller.
Okay.
So it sold the second most amount in that year. Just because Born in the USA sold 17 million, didn't do it in 1984. It was running up, but Huey Lewis was second to, was the second high, even
really
though Purple Rain was number one for 22 weeks.
That Huey blows Lewis, my mind that Born in the USA didn't take off right away like that. Yeah.
For the year 1980. Yeah, but just think, Huey Lewis had sales that started in January. They didn't hit number one until the middle of the year, basically. But they had a head start of sales, just like Michael Jackson did, right? He had the first, he had the whole year, even though he wasn't number one, he was still selling. So they, but he was, he was right behind them. So
what do you think did it for them to be, selling so much, for them to be? Huey Lewis was quoted as saying that, they, at this time frame, the 80s, people had to make hit records, otherwise you were, you were gone. The music business was starting to change here. People made albums back in the day, regardless of they were hits or not. They were just contractually obligated to make a certain amount of albums, and here, yeah, hit singles were the thing, and
Well, there's his stated purpose, but much like when we talked about In Excess with Kick, he said the same thing. His thing was like, we need to make every track on this album like it could be a single. Like I think that kind of takes away any thoughts of experimentation and it's like if you're going with that mission statement, you're going to approach it in a certain way. Now, is everything on this potentially hit single? No.
No.
But
No.
but maybe that's what did it for them, is it made it so cohesive. And some of the things that you said is they were throwbacky in a time in 1984. I mean, let's talk a little bit about 1984, what was going on with other albums. The album 1984 from Van Halen, aside from all the other stuff we talked about, The Unforgettable Fire by U2, Private Dancer by Tina Turner. That's when she like broke huge. I'm surprised that didn't go to number one. I'm like what? Like a Virgin by Madonna.
Yeah.
Also did not hit number one in 1984 when it came out. Make It Big by Wham. Another one. I mean, these, Heartbeat City by The Cars. You've got, of course, metal. You've got Defenders of the Faith. You got Last in Line by Dio. You got Stop Making Sense. Building the Perfect Beast by Don Henley. Reckless by Bryan Adams, which we will get to that album, because you want to talk about an album that's chock full of just hit after hit. Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister. Couldn't Stand the Weather, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I think you get, there was so much, let's call it what it is for now, so many more bigger artists
yeah,
that could have occupied that spot. That's what makes this album so special, is that for 1 week they were able to kind of grab the golden ring. And I think there's a lot. I think it's you asked what it was. It's the MTV effect. These guys looked great. They didn't take themselves seriously. The videos were fun, right? Because they, I was just watching if This Is It, which I really love. That it's so nostalgic when you watch it. It's like, oh my god, like in the 80s, it was like everything was perfect back then. It's like,
right.
Right. So yeah, they were another band that was like tailor made. They leaned into it with taking advantage of that. They didn't shy away from doing videos. They was like, yeah, if we're hot, let's kind of keep it going.
Yep, and they, like you say, they did look good. They had the charisma. Certainly Huey Lewis did. He was, sort of this, not, really young looking, but sort of in the middle there. Like he had personality. He had the certain look. But then you look at the members of the band. Some of them looked younger. Some of them were, the heartthrobs, and the Johnny Cola. It's like the rock and roller. He kind of, he could have fit in with like Stray Cats or something.
Yeah,
like,
easily. With the hair,
with the pompadour, and
absolutely.
all that kind of thing. Yeah. So
yeah. Just think they were tailor made. Like visually, they looked good.
Yeah.
The music was. I don't mean this in a bad way, but it wasn't offensive. Meaning, it was just like Huey Lewis is like comfort food. They're like the good guys of rock and roll. No, no controversies or scandals, and like I said, they kind of, everybody across the board kind of like them. If even if you like the new British, second British new wave of British invasion, this still kind of fit. You could still get into this, and then if you were into other stuff harder, he still was there.
Yeah,
he kind of was able to play both sides against the middle, and just kind of exist in that small space where everybody kind of, like I said, which was the curse for Hall & Oates. I said everyone likes Hall & Oates, and then they hate each other. but I think Huey Lewis falls into that. I think you put this album on, and it's immediately summer.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, it took me back listening to it. It's like you say. I mean, not every track is great, but the hits are certainly still fresh in your mind, especially if you hadn't really, I don't really listen to radio as much anymore. So I kind of go back, and I like listening to stuff that takes me back to those days. And, Yeah, how many car rides? Like
Yeah.
we always remember how, and this was in the rotation for sure.
Oh, absolutely. They,
You know,
we latched on to things and we really like dug it.
yeah, and it was
You know.
our mutual friend Johnny. I mean, he was a big fan as well. We went to see them, which was at Roseland in
Well,
Manhattan.
we saw them twice in the same year.
Yeah,
So I actually
yeah,
did the research. I have the dates.
he's got the
I have the
dates.
dates. We saw them twice in the same year in 1984. We saw them before they got big. We saw them on February 3rd at the Roseland Ballroom in New York City,
Mhm.
which is a very small club
Oh my
type
god.
place. We were literally it's kind of a standing room, it's all general admission kind of standing room, no seating, and we were right in front.
Yeah, that
I
thing was great, but after a while, I mean, it was so packed in there. We had to get out of there. I mean, at least I did. It was a great show, but a miserable experience. We were
yeah,
literally like it was, like this with people just, and it's not like you're watching uh, a punk band or anything
yeah,
like that where people are like moving. It was everybody was just sort
yeah,
of
just
like
packed
packed
in, and
like
it was
sardines.
winter.
You couldn't move, and it
Yeah,
was hot as hell.
yeah.
I couldn't wait
When I
to get to the back and drink, have a
yeah,
drink, full drink. Oh
when
my
I
god.
watched the Heart of Rock and Roll video,
Yeah.
that's what like it kind of like that's what it kind of
Yes.
was. It was just kind of like they were right there. We were standing kind of right in front. It was kind of there. Then the second time we saw them would be August 17th in the same year. So we had seen them before they broke big, and then we saw them after they hit huge at Pier 84 in New
Mhm.
York City, which no longer exists. They don't. I don't think there's any concerts at the pier anymore.
That's too
There's
bad
other
'cause
piers
I
and
s
other
I saw quite a
places.
bit. I got there's quite a few shows there.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Pier 84. I remember that show. We saw them outside. That's right near where the Intrepid is. For those of you,
Mhm.
if you're into New York City, it's kind of near where the Intrepid is. But Pier 84 as a venue is not there, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we were definitely into. We were definitely in the thick of it with Huey Lewis. We really dug the sound. It was, it's Americana. It wasn't. It was something different from the second British invasion that was happening, and I loved as much as I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Culture Club, Eurythmics, and all that stuff that was going on. Duran Duran. There was also, and we talked, and you mentioned it specifically that the in the 80s the American response was less electronic and more kind of heartland or more just kind of
Yeah.
guitars.
Yeah. You had Don Henley going solo. You had, Bruce Hornsby out of nowhere, came out of nowhere. Just got, these but again, sort of incorporating a little bit of a modern sound, but still very Americana. John Cougar Mellencamp, Bruce Springsteen, yeah, just quite a few. I mean, I remember, even the opening act of Huey Lewis, Gary U.S. Bonds.
Oh, that's
This
right.
guy, yeah, remember? I mean, he
That was at
was,
Roseland. That was at
yeah,
Roseland.
he was
Yeah.
great. That kind of stuff. I would have never have. I've heard of him. I think I might have seen like one video by the
Yeah,
guy.
he was old. He was like an
He
old
was
act
old
though. He was like a
act,
60s act. Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
because of Huey Lewis and that style and that sort of genre, you're incorporating these kinds of like soul
Yeah, he fit
type of
in.
act, yeah,
Yep.
type of R&B acts, and that was great.
Yeah,
So
it was probably somebody that they liked, I'm
a
sure.
lot of a lot of times, these kinds of people that's what got me into some of the classic artists of the day that we weren't around for,
Mhm.
or were coming late to the party for, but it's because of people like Huey Lewis and
Yeah.
Phil Collins, and that got us into into this kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
some adjacent artists that
these were the
their
door
influences.
openers, the sort of the gateway artists of the period, and it's very nostalgic. There, and
Yeah.
of course they hit it big again with Back to the Future. That's a big deal as well.
Okay,
So that
well, since you brought it up,
the segue.
let's talk about. I mean,
I
we're going to
had
talk
to,
about
yeah,
the
I had to
album,
go
but
right
let's
into
let-
that.
that- you know that that's where the part in the opening comes in is they
Okay.
had come, this album had come out, and we're going to talk about some of the songs, but let's, since you went there, we'll go there. Um, they were approached by a company making a movie, and they said, hey, can you write some songs or write a song for us? And like, okay, well, see what we can do. And in the meantime, the company was using I Want a New Drug. The movie company was using it as like a temp track of like, okay, it's kind of what we want. And then Huey Lewis like, nah, they ended up working on Back to the Future instead, which would be The Power of Love, which was a big song.
Yeah.
So the producers of this other movie got another artist, and they said, well, here's kind of what we're looking for. Or here's what we were going with, and what can you come up with? And that movie was Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And the theme to Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr. sound a little too close to I Want a New Drug.
That's true.
So, so they, of course, lawsuits were filed and things were, settled. They settled the case, and it was supposed to be no one, don't talk about it. We don't talk about this settlement of the case. Well, like in like 2000 or 2004, Huey Lewis was doing an interview and he mentioned it. And Ray Parker Jr. is like, oh, I heard that interview and you said something. You talked about this you weren't supposed to. So you filed a counter lawsuit.
Oh.
Like some years later and said you broke, this confidentiality agreement. We weren't supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to, no comment. But he didn't, and so they got sued again for it. But it was the song they played was "I Want a New Drug," and then Ray Parker took it and kind of got Ghostbusters out of it.
Okay, so based on that temp track,
based on "I Want a New Drug,"
right? Wow, never knew that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and of course, there's always we've talked about there's a fine line between inspiration and desperation and ripping someone off.
Sure.
Influence and stealing. But this one, I think they said, it's just a little too close for us. But so they would
really like that song, man. They must have really,
or
the riff or whatever it was.
Like, okay, I mean, if they said, well, this is what we were listening to or kind of looking for. Well, then what are you going to do as the guy that gets the job? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of figure out a way to kind of do that, but he just came a little too close. I mean, that's all it was, it's like kind of,
sure. Yeah.
So I Want a New Drug was one of the hits off this album, but the first hit was Heart and Soul, which I didn't know was not an original. They didn't write it, and it was recorded twice before, like in the previous 2 years. One was by the group The Bus Boys, and I listened to their version, and oh my God, it's not good. And then you remember the group Exile?
Yes.
Kiss You All Over? They did a version of it, 6 minutes long. And it's and across the board, the three of them, the three versions of the song, the arrangements are exactly the same.
That's
amazing. The difference with this one is there's something about the energy. You can listen to all three, and they all have the same keyboard, dun, 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 like they all have it. Everything, there's really not much different about each one, but this one has a different energy. And Huey Lewis was in the studio, and he when they gave him the song, he thought that it was something unreleased, and then he heard the Bus Boys version of it, and he said, "You know what? I think we can kind of improve on that." And they did, because there's something about Heart and Soul is one of my favorite songs of the 80s and one of my favorite songs by Huey Lewis, because it has just a certain like nighttime nightclub, of that era energy,
Yeah, it's
his vocals. He's really kind of, just really giving it like the energy. He's not over singing. He's just giving it the power that it needs.
I haven't heard the previous two, but I did. I had heard that it is a cover, but I think it's tailor made for the Huey Lewis. It's perfect for him, perfect for what they were doing all along. I think so. Yeah, it's very surprising to hear that he didn't write it. I knew that much, but it was just. But I have to go back and listen to those other.
Yeah,
versions.
I'll link it in the show notes. I'll grab the two versions of it, and but yeah, I think it's probably for me that Heart and Soul is kind of represents the Huey Lewis sound. It's like, for me, that's it. But then of course Heart of Rock and Roll is just, and again, these songs are like tailor made for the radio. It's like Heart of Rock and Roll, and 84 was, USA and America, and so all, Born in the USA. So all this stuff was, you're asking why was it so popular? I think there was a lot of different things that were hitting at the same time. So it's image, it's sound, it's a counter sound to what the British invasion that was going on. There's a lot of things to it. And yeah, like you said, they have the throwback song, like I think they overstep with Bad is Bad. Because it's really heavy on,
Yeah.
like, I'm like, okay,
Well,
like they really lean into it.
well, anybody who actually says doo-wop,
Well,
it's it kind
ELO
of
has
it
on
kind of
Telephone
gets
Line, so
but it kind of gets that's a little, it might be crossing the line a little bit
yeah,
for me,
they
but
really lean into it there.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, for sure, yeah. But it's still, it's not a bad song. It's not,
No,
it's not the worst song on the record, but yeah.
yeah.
I don't know.
And to think, going back to "I Want a New Drug" because there's only 9 songs on this album.
Mhm.
Um, when I was listening to it today, I was driving, doing some errands. I put it on. I'm like, what? I was like, I'm listening to it. I'm like, wait. I was like, the guitar solo is like felt like it was 3 minutes long. Like there has to be a radio edit because on the album version, I didn't remember. There's an extended,
Mhm.
super extended guitar solo, like which really kind of I was shocked. I'm like, I don't remember this. That
Yeah.
this solo, like you think it's coming to an end, and then you're ready for "I Want a New Drug," but and then they just they go to another whole set of 8 bars
Yeah,
or
it
so.
is longer. There is a
Yeah,
much shorter version. Yep.
which I
I
dug.
know. Yeah. Mhm.
I think it kind of I think it rocked it up a little bit more.
Mhm.
It took away some of the poppiness to it of yeah, it's like a 3-minute song.
Mhm.
Um, that solo by Chris Hayes was just really tasty and just fit in. Wasn't
Mhm.
out of place, but just really long, and they just kept on kind of like, all right, yeah, go more. Almost like they were jamming. It's like, yeah, just
Yeah.
keep going, and we'll let you know when we're coming back in. That's the way it felt like. So
I always admired, Cola, because how do you go from guitar to saxophone? And I distinctly
yeah,
remember him wearing the sax
yep,
while he's playing guitar, like he would switch off and he would do, that's
yeah,
an interesting combination right there,
yeah.
because it's two completely different um
And yeah, it's not like playing a guitar, then a bass
approaches
or a
to
banjo. Yeah,
right, exactly. You're not playing the string. It's like, yeah, it's
you have to change your whole
you
your whole
have to be
mindset.
really really talented to approach both and to have those chops. But he was great in
Yeah,
that sense. Yeah.
Mike Love would wear a saxophone and he couldn't even play it.
Just for show.
Right? He just sounds a sax. It's like
I'm surprised it wasn't an inflatable mic, like
just like
yeah.
he played like one note on it, like for whatever it's like.
Yeah.
It's like okay, that's not really playing saxophone.
And
That's
then of
being
course
told to.
we'd be remiss not to mention the Tower of Power horn section in both on Picture This and which were the really the sort of icing on the cake there. So
Mhm.
those I loved '80s horns.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. I mean, this is a time when people were doing it on keyboards.
yeah,
But there were some bands who actually had those. And of course, saxophone was huge.
yeah,
Especially like Lost Boys, that dude with the
yep,
the shirtless dude, playing the sax, but man, he could kill it. Like that was but there was certain something to to hear a very synth laden track, like a very electronic track, and then somebody kind of comes right in with that piercing sax solo. Like
yeah.
it's I don't know what it was, but it just very popular
Yeah, it was
of the
used,
time.
used in,
Yeah,
brass sections were kind of out of favor, but
yeah,
certain like Phil Collins had an appreciation for it and used it,
yeah.
in when it's used in a tasty way. Joe Jackson
Oh
would
yeah,
also
yep.
kind of embrace that with Body and Soul. He kind of really kind of leaned into the big band stuff in the mid '80s. So, there were some acolytes of that were kind of like, yeah, I want to kind of use this and experiment with it. And good, it didn't get so popular that it was everywhere because then it would it would flame out, So Huey
Mhm.
Lewis used it in the right way, Phil Collins, and of course, the great Earth, Wind and Fire kind of trademarked it, and Casey and the Sunshine Band
Yeah.
were
I
like
mean, but
the
I think it
yeah
maybe because the '80s was such a uplifting time, musically speaking. I mean, and it really does. I mean, you talk about and it's a big sound. So perhaps maybe a lot of bands were just not ready to sort of go that
yeah
simple
yeah.
with
Or we could just do
just
it with the DX7.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like we can just have someone sample it and play it,
Yeah.
which it doesn't give you the same.
No, it does not.
You could
I
tell
that's
fake
one thing
brass.
I love. I love keyboards. I love when people experiment with synthesizers and such, but not horns. Not when you're simulating a horn sound. It just never works for me.
Yeah, you can tell the fake
Yeah.
brass. Even Steve Winwood fooled around with it. Roll with it. He
Yeah.
had the horn section
Yeah.
in it, so there was it was there. It was a tool for people to use that in the right way. And Huey Lewis were definitely their music, their style of music absolutely was born for them to use that, to incorporate that with their sound.
Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, so we get of course the obligatory Vietnam number that you had to have in the 80s about what it was like or how underappreciated the vets were
Yeah.
coming home. That's walking on a thin line, which they didn't write. Um, and of course, if this is it, I mean, there was really, four big hits: Heart of Rock and Roll, Heart and Soul, I Want a New Drug, and If This Is It. And
Mhm.
like I said, the video for If This Is It is like an instant time machine. It's kind of like, it's so of its time. And again, they were kind of goofy, but harmless, but the song is a great song.
Yeah.
It's got the right use of the doo-wops. Like
Yes.
this is a tasty use of it.
Mhm.
Bad is bad is just really them leaning into like their roots and kind of like street corner around a barrel on fire type stuff, right? Like that,
Frank Stallone.
yeah, like that kind of thing
Yeah. Yeah.
out in San Francisco on the boardwalk.
Right.
Um, but If This Is It is kind of like the right way, and I think that's why it hit is because it's just you know
Yeah.
has a great vocal. Like I said, Huey Lewis plays harmonica. He's got kind of a gruff, he's got a mature sounding voice. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. Not really gruff, but mature.
Mature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have a lot of
Range.
range,
Yeah.
but for what for the voice that he had, it was perfect for the music. It was, like you say, it was a very throaty type of voice, and he could really, really belt it out, but he could also go low, on This Is It, when he's a girl don't lie, like
Yeah.
that
Yep.
undercut of, but there's a little bit of harmony there. He really knew how to, really craft those harmonies as well. Like, dating back to the previous album. Um, I to this day, I still get chills with, um, some of the stuff on that record and the harmonies on that record. So it's just, yeah. But
Yeah.
this was a little bit looser. I think it wasn't as tightly knit. I don't think the production was as, you know, it was kind of, very tight on Picture This.
Mhm.
It was meticulously done. Here, it felt like more of a live
Yeah.
setting. The vocals were not so perfect. They were, they sort of had room to breathe and just, and like you said, a little bit rockier too. Some of the
Yeah.
songs,
I'm gonna
yeah.
use a term, but don't take it the way I'm saying it. The way it was recorded almost sounds like a bar band.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like it
that's
sounds like they
perfect.
were this is like a bar band that recorded an album lot,
Yeah.
like it's got that kind of like loose feel. Like we're really good at this. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We
Kinda
know the
like the band
songs.
that you go see, like, every
Exactly.
Saturday night. They're on the back or on the
Exactly.
bill. But, yeah, man, maybe they hit it big, but they're always coming around.
Exactly.
They always play that one show and then, they hit to the roots, but
Yeah,
that's the vibe you get. Yes,
yeah, and I don't mean that as a bad thing.
even the album cover suggests that with the,
Yeah.
the cover reminds me of Double Days at Dobbs Ferry.
And
If you
that's in
look back, I
upstate
mean,
New York.
you know what I mean? So if you
Yeah.
look at the cover, it's like, oh my God, the decor, it just, wow, and it's probably in somebody's bedroom or something,
No, it was an actual bar. They
That is a
said
bar.
they
Okay.
wanted to that's why they chose the name Sports, because their name was Huey Lewis and the News. So this
Yeah.
was like sports, like the sports page. And
Yeah.
where do people go to watch sports? They go to a bar.
Mm-hmm.
So that bar is, I think it's still around. It's still there, but it was an actual bar.
Yeah.
But yeah, and maybe that too. Maybe that the visual in my mind of them in the bar kind of places there. But like I said, that's not a bad thing, because there's a certain energy you get from a bar band.
Mm-hmm.
Right, when they're out there and they know what they're doing. Then not like drunken bar band, but a bar band that's really tight and knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what this album is kind of like listening to, and that's the vibe I was getting. I'm like, yeah, I could feel like if I was sitting in a pub, and these guys were like, these songs are songs I would expect to hear out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is not a bad thing.
And everybody knows your name, right? Kind of thing,
Yeah.
kind of vibe. Everybody loves the band. Everybody comes to see them, and it's
absolutely,
absolutely. So, yep.
After they did Back to the Future and Power of Love, which I love that song too. Back in Time. Those
that never gets old.
Yeah,
never gets old.
It just has a feeling to it. And again, that's the thing about Huey Lewis, is their songs have a certain energy to them,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's what it is. I think that's what makes them. They're not studio technique artists like Steely Dan, right? They're not like architects.
No,
they have a certain sound that they know that they achieve, and that's what their bread and butter is. But they would kind of see a resurgence in the 90s, right? American Psycho.
Yeah,
with
right.
Christian Bale. He goes into there's a whole section where when he's about to kill somebody, about talking about Huey Lewis and the News and talking about sports, about how sports was the pinnacle of that they really came into their own commercially and artistically, and espousing about the merits of Huey Lewis in the News while he's wearing a clear suit,
ready to cut somebody up. Yeah,
and there's
like
there's
Dexter.
plastic all over the floors, and if you don't know that what's going on in that, when you walk in, you got a problem.
I mean, that should be like one of my favorite films. He's not only is he talking about Huey Lewis, he's also talking about Phil Collins and Genesis, and it's like the stuff. It just out of nowhere, it just comes out. It's just like, wow, that's amazing. That's just amazing.
Yeah. It was actually in the book too, so it wasn't. It was just actually part of the of the whole thing.
He must be a fan. The author's a fan.
Yeah.
So there you go. Big time.
Harlan Ellison or Bret Easton Ellis. Bret Easton Ellis wrote it.
There you go.
Not Harlan Ellison. Bret Easton Ellis.
Yeah, he's a sci-fi writer.
Yeah, I knew it was one. It was one of them.
It's one of those LE. Yeah. HE. Whatever. But yeah,
one of those people.
One of those guys.
I can't keep track. Yeah. But yeah, this they did a 30th anniversary remaster, but I don't think this needs to be remastered. This album sounds great on its own. There's no qualms about Huey Lewis. Like when they self-produced it, they knew what they were doing, because it just it sounds great.
Yeah, and the remaster, I listened to the remaster. It's not it's not that much different, but it's a little bit, I dare say, more polished. I don't know. It is really not much difference. There. What's really nice though is they have the entire album with live tracks.
Yeah,
from like that tour. So there's several different cities that are. Yep. I think 3 of which are in Cleveland, which is interesting because Heart of Rock and Roll, I think, is Huey Lewis wanted to call say Heart of Rock and Roll is in Cleveland. And the rest of the band were like, they made him change it to "It's Still Beating," which of course, is a better, But of course, he gets Cleveland in there anyway.
And isn't that where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ended up?
That's right. Yeah. So he must. Yeah, he had the foresight. There. That's right.
Foreshadowing there. But yeah, this is absolutely this for us is one of the soundtrack of our live albums.
Moments.
I mean, and it's one that I have it on vinyl. I don't know why I keep forgetting to bring the vinyls out for these episodes. I'm just like such a shithead.
Yeah, you got to get you have one of those things that says now playing, right? Just post it right in.
I do, but I took I just forget. It's age is creeping up, but this is one of those ones that is it's not overly dated. That's one of the good things about the artists that were doing this type of stuff, that like the John Mellencamp's and the Bruce Springsteens, because they were still using they weren't going in for all the fads of the DX7s and the sequencers, although they did use some sequencing on 2 tracks on this. It dates it less. It's harder to say this is from the 80s because it doesn't have all the chirps, the beeps, and the whirs and the whistles and all the that kind
electronic
of stuff.
drums, the
Exactly.
Simmons, the whole.
They avoided that, and they kind of just said we're just an American rock band, and this is what we're going to do.
Or is it just these are the kinds of groups that you want to, and when it comes to nostalgia and seeking out the old days, this is definitely one of those that you want to pull out and put on. I mean, it could be that simple for at least for me. There are just certain albums that just have that appeal, and just that's the only reason why you want to listen to it. Not necessarily because we've all moved on. Our musical tastes have changed over the years. We've gotten into, I dare say, more sophisticated types of music, or,
hoity-toity.
Hoity-toity, snobbish, whatever. No, there are staples, and like you say, soundtrack. So I'll put this up against any soundtrack of the day, and as being just that, just put that on, drop that needle, and there you go.
I think it's an easy listen too, because it has so many hits on it,
and it's such a short
that carries, and they're spaced out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost like every other track, it seems.
Yeah.
So
what is it, like 37 minutes? Change long.
It's 9 songs.
Yeah.
It's like,
so
yeah. The longest songs are the openers on each side. But yeah, I think that's one of the things too. It's an easy listen. Again, this was when artists weren't overloading, because of the restrictions of the format. You had to pick your best stuff, and that's what you put forth, and that's what makes a lot of these albums so timeless, is because it wasn't a hodgepodge of, like I've said in the past, let's fill up the CD because we can. We have 100 minutes, so let's use 100 minutes. Like, no, this you only had, album was the standard, and then you would just put it on cassette, even though you could get more on cassette, if you put more tape on it, but it wouldn't, you would reduce the fidelity of it. So what could fit on a vinyl was how you did it. Unless you were going to do a double album, and most groups just didn't do double albums because, you're talking about essentially double the output, like, unless you really had something to say. So, so that's what was great about these albums, is you can get in and you can get out, and you kind of get the best of them.
It's almost probably a little bit more challenging. I would say that trying to get every song as a hit, like they wanted to do. Not, and like, again, not every song is that, but it's close. It's, there's, I don't think there's a bad song on this record per se, but it's, some are better than others. But the challenge is in okay, if we have only a certain amount of space there, what can we do? Let's focus our energy on giving input, putting out the best we can do.
Yeah. What's the A game?
Yeah. Any more to this would have dropped it down. For sure.
Well, unless they took off Bad is Bad and put on Power of Love.
Yeah. Well,
but that would actually, Power of Love would actually be inserted on their next album, which was called FOR.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were right. And this set them up for that. This set them up for like Back to the Future, and kind of, and then once that movie took off, like, Huey Lewis and the News were like attached to the tail of they're literally holding onto the tail of the comet, and that really just helped them soar. These guys were such a creature of the 80s, because they really kind of, their next album came out, it did like 3 million copies, and then after that was Small World, and things were just, this was the pinnacle, and then
starting to
I don't want to say declined, but they, the public kind of was moving, tastes were changing, and
right.
In the 80s, if you remember, this, tastes would swing very quickly, and this stuff could almost be like out of favor. It's like, oh, it's Huey Lewis. It's like, okay, like,
yeah, he's yesterday's news.
Yeah. In 89, you're like, oh, that's so like 84.
Yeah.
and there was so many other, Sinead O'Connor would come up, and Midnight Oil, and all these other socially conscious REM, like
Hmm.
the stuff was churning over, and then all of a sudden these guys are like, well, what about us? Like, well, you don't really have anything important to say. You're just making, just make songs, you
Right.
know,
Then
as things change, but there's a place for this.
yeah, definitely a place in our hearts for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for time, and yeah,
Yeah. I put this
and
on
that's
and I
okay.
smile. Like when I listen to this, I'm like, yeah, it's just like, oh,
I mean, even if this was the last and only album they ever did, it would still be great. It would still
yeah,
be special. You know what I mean? It didn't have to be, have a longevity. They definitely had a shelf life, but they didn't. The legacy of this band is not what's important. It's what was out at the time. It's how we felt at that age and when it was popular and that kind of thing. So and that's what it's all about. That's what keeps us young. That's what keeps us, thinking back. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think these guys could be contenders for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think there's a strong
yeah,
case to be made. Based
yeah.
on other bands that have gotten in before.
Why not? Yeah,
Um, yeah. Like I said, being a part of that graduating class of 1984, where there were only 5 number one albums, and they were, even if it was for a week, they were at the dance. It
yeah.
doesn't make a difference. They worked their asses off.
Hmm.
That's one of the things. Like you could tell that this is like a hard working band. Like these guys were hungry
Yeah.
for it. Like it's like that. You don't really see that too much anymore. Where like the band, you could tell the band's like really working, like to
Hmm.
kind of really getting good at what they do. They've got a sound and they're working with it, and they're not. Huey Lewis didn't change with the times and say, oh, we're going to do an electronic, space
Yeah.
opera.
Or an
It's like,
overly
no,
political record,
yeah,
or
they stayed where they
yeah,
were.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, we do good music. We do good music that
Good
makes you
music
feel good
for right to make exactly.
for
There
a
you
good
go. You hit it
time.
right
Like
now.
that's what we
Yep.
want to do. And there's a space for that, and you need that. Everything
And
can't
it's
be.
like you said before, they never took themselves seriously in that, or too seriously. The work was serious, the hard work, the touring, and boy, they put on a good show. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah,
It was good. It was good stuff, and it's a great memory. And this is available, so we highly suggest you check it out. I don't even think we need to do favorite tracks. I mean, I'm just going to go with, all the hits are just hits. Like the hits are just,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know, the other stuff isn't. I don't want to say it's subpar, but it's certainly the hits. You could tell there's a difference in the hits.
hmm,
You know,
yeah,
and then the other stuff, they get a little, they lean into some blue, some of their, they with the non-hit stuff, they kind of lean into their roots a little bit more, right? They do Honky
yeah.
Tonk Blues, which is a Hank Williams number at the very end, so they are kind of massaging some of those influences, but then also, putting that on the shelf, that's great. It's very listenable and there's nothing wrong with it. But
I
then
always
here,
like that though about an artist that can show you what they're into.
yeah,
That to me was a learning curve too. It was like, who influenced these guys? So, and then you find out who wrote that song, and then you go back and you check it out. And, if it is somebody, that was an artist or just a songwriter.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I always dug that. I always thought that was part of it.
yeah,
That's just how you grow into listening to music is who influenced who and that kind of thing. So
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we're gonna give it high marks, and like I said, it was our one of our first 3 practice episodes. So 5 years later, we dusted it off, and it's like, you know what? I think we need to give it its due. I don't think it should,
Yeah.
be in the dustbin of. We what we can do is we can put the original one out on our Buy Me a Coffee. If you're a supporter there, we can put it there, and you can kind of check out when we were young and green and didn't know about podcasting, and 4 years later, still not really much different, but the
No,
microphones are better. The
come on. I
microphones are
think
better now.
yeah, yeah, maybe the equipment, but I don't know. I think we've grown. We've grown
We
a
have
great
not
deal.
gotten around the learning curve yet. We're still on the curve. We're still working through it. So, but that's going to do it, I think, for this episode of the
Mm.
3324 podcast. You can find us on your favorite social media ones, or most of them: Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Those are the 3 major ones. If you like a video version, we'll have that as well. So you can just kind of look at us smiling and beaming and goofing as we talked about Huey Lewis in the news. But it is one of our favorites, and it's one of the, for us, for Eric and I, one of the rock and roll 101s, the ones that we grew up together,
right,
listening to. You know, it's kind of right around that time we were just getting out of high school, and thought we were manly men, but then we listened to Huey Lewis and we heard what a man was. What a harp playing man sounded like.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong there. Yeah. We like to reserve these kinds of episodes for just the two of us, because it does take us back, and that's what this, the heart of this podcast is what it's about.
Yeah.
But
not the heart of rock and roll, but the heart of the podcast.
But we really enjoy our frequent guests, and we really like to get their insight and input and stuff.
We love
it. But
every
now and again, we like to throw episodes like this in there to, just to showcase the love that we had for this stuff, and just to share a little bit of what
the two of us shooting
shooting the shit, and how we what we grew up with. And this is one of those shining examples. So
this one is personal to us. So we figured, let's do it solo, which because we've got enough to talk about with it, because we were there, we lived it, and like I said, this was a very special album. So I think you guys have gotten the point about it. Go check it out. More than just the hits, it's a quick listen. So just kind of take the ride with them and see what get a little more background to see what was behind some of the hits, and what, like Eric said, what some of the influences were, because you get that on this album too. So it's all very listenable, easy going, easy breezy, and take you right back to the summer of '84 when this hit number one. So that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to put in the show notes, I'm going to put the other two versions of Heart and Soul by Exile and the Bus Boys, so you guys can hear that and hear how very similar they sound. But from an energy standpoint, they're miles. Huey Lewis was miles ahead. He wasn't even close.
Mm-hmm.
So for Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.